Hi, I'm Brittany Ashley, your host of Breaking Norms, Building Dreams, your guide through this transformative journey in both business and life. This is your place crafted for dreamers, doers, or anyone who has been told they can't. Get ready as we challenge those narratives together. You're tuning in live to the United Public Radio Network, airing on 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. We are streaming on all the popular platforms every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join me for a candid and thought-provoking conversation celebrating your unique journey because you are worth it.
This is the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 in the Gulf Coast. UPRN talkradio.com. Esoteric programming at its finest.
Our symbol, the trident, gifted to us by the priests of Troy Xenos centuries ago when one of the first monster hunting teams out of Corinth battled a contingent of Vrykula that had infested their temple. After the victory over the monsters, the head priest declared, "You are three lances acting as one, not unlike Poseidon's mighty trident of light." That would become our name, the Trident of Light, for the good we did and still do against the dark evils of this world.
Available at Amazon Books.
Welcome to Negotiating Happiness, the show that helps you find happiness, success, and balance in your work and life. I'm Adriana Fierster, your host for this journey into entrepreneurship and personal growth. We're broadcasting live on 107.7 and 105.3 FM in New Orleans as part of the United Public Radio Network. We explore the latest strategies, insights, and stories from successful entrepreneurs and experts. From managing stress to building a thriving business, we've got you covered.
The Power Agency is built for those who move like predators, decide like weapons, and execute like their life depends on it. You're either fully in, or you're invisible.
Okay, so somebody's invisible somewhere. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Author's Call. You know, guys, sometimes I'm just as surprised as anybody else when I'm listening to these promos and these intros. Sometimes it's the first time I've heard them when we go live on the show sometimes, so it's kind of funny to me. But I want to welcome everyone to the Author's Call. I hope everybody out there around the planet's having a great day today, or great evening, or great afternoon, whatever it is on your big part of the blue planet. I mean, I know for the Australians, it's a happy another day from today, it's happy Sunday over there. And for all my friends in Europe right now, it's about 10 o'clock till about 2 in the morning. So I'm glad y'all are staying up and listening. We have Orson Scott Card with us tonight, who is just probably the best sci-fi writer out there. But we're going to talk more about that when we get into it. Also, he's a very interesting gentleman on top of that. But we'll also talk more about that in a few minutes. We also have John Goodman with us, who's here with us on the weekends. He's a great guy to hang out with. And he's also a lot of fun to chat with and talk with and eat breakfast with, and oh wait, that came out wrong. But anyway, yeah. Okay. Anyway, hopefully Emily wasn't listening to that. Welcome to the show, everybody. Guys, nice to have you. Orson, nice to have you here. Scott, it's great to have you on the show. And John's always a blast. So, John, before we start with Scott, what you up to?
Well, I'm all excited that we're going to have a fun show this week. We're vacillating between winter and spring and summer here in LA. It goes Wednesday's gonna be 90. Last night it was down to 62. So it's amazing how it just goes up and down.
Down to 62. I'll bet you had to put on a jacket. It was so cold.
It was a parka, I tell you.
Now, I've spent months at a time in Los Angeles, and I know perfectly well that the word seasons never applies in LA, except for when you guys are having earthquake weather. I don't know what that means, but I've heard that expression more than, this is earthquake weather, better be careful. So let's just say that the weather and the planet and the climate function so differently in LA that this really is, amazingly, we can go to another planet without having to reach light speed. Very good.
Exactly. That is definitely California. It is definitely the land of nuts and fruits. Way different than any other land with vegetation.
Yeah.
Yes, Stephanie, I'm not commenting on that last comment.
While everybody else is experiencing prices going down, prices going up here in California.
But that's weird for me, because when I was out there with you this year, everywhere I ate was cheaper this year, including a little place, whatever the little thing was down in the back of the behind the check-in counter, whatever was it, the bodega, what the hell was it called? Man, they went down like $3 on their sandwiches from last year. I was like, look at this. And then the hamburger, my favorite restaurant we eat at over there, they were down like $3. I was surprised.
Well, now you have to say what the restaurant is.
It was the one at the Roosevelt. That was $2 actually.
25 degrees.
Yeah, so they actually went down $2. I was surprised. Most everywhere I ate was for California. We'll say for LA was reasonable, especially for being in Hollywood. But I found it to be quite a bit higher last year. I don't know why.
Well, if you check the media right now, that's LA Times, which is its own breed of reporting.
Yes.
They were going like, the price of eggs in California has been really, really high, and it finally started coming down. Then they said, yeah, the eggs are coming down. Now everything else is going up. You've got the price of beef, the price of vegetables, everything else is now skyrocketing. So there's always something there that you've got the media to.
It is though a shock though, because when I come home, I mean eggs are $2.99 here, brown meat's $4, gallon of milk's about $2.88. It's fairly cheap, and it's going to get quite a bit cheaper. When Trump left office last time, we were paying 89 cents a dozen for eggs, $1.40 for gas. Right now, damn diesel's cheaper than gas is. I haven't seen that since I was a teenager, and that was before the sun came up. So I mean, it was. I'm just saying, it's. I haven't seen it. I mean, for some reason in the 80s or 90s, whenever it was, they flip flop and diesel just left gas behind. And now all of a sudden here it is. So we should actually see things come down quite a bit more.
Well, to add a note of archaeology here, in the 50s, when I lived in California, growing up in the Bay Area, we still had 20-cent bread loaves. We still had movie admissions where you'd get change for $1. Prices are all ludicrous to me, because
they are.
I set my idea of what things should cost. 20 cents a gallon gas. So you go in and say $1 worth of regular, not fill it up, and not $5. You give them $5, they're going to wonder what to do with the other $3.
Yeah.
Prices change, but in those days, if you were going to be a millionaire, that meant something. You could live on the interest from a passbook savings account. On $1 million in that savings account, you could live on that very nicely. Now, that won't even get you your rent.
It's bad. I mean, it is kind of it's a little bit on the scary side. I know when I started driving, gas was only about 45 cents a gallon. I think cigarettes were 30 cents a pack. And
the cheapest I paid for gas was 18.9 cents, and that was
that's cheap.
A gas war. That was back in Tucson.
Yeah, remember gas wars? Isn't that hilarious?
Yeah,
people used to try to compete on price with gas.
Yeah.
Yes, but I remember when all of a sudden they said, "Oh, it's going to be 99 cents now." I was like, "What?" And then we had that you had to fill up on odd and even days. I was 15, I think. I made so much money. We'd get like 30 cars and put them in a line, and we'd rotate them and bring them. And we had one guy picking them up, one guy dropping them off, and one of us pulling them up and filling them up and just going along. We made a ton of money doing that. I mean, for kids too. I think we were bringing home about $100 each a day, and this was 78, 76, somewhere around there.
See,
that's like big money
today. A science fiction writer then, if he wrote about $3.40 gasoline per gallon, that would be the unbelievable thing.
Yes.
Yeah, faster than light travel, fine. We'll take that in science fiction. But $3.50 per gallon for gasoline, ludicrous. That could never happen. And here it is. At least we're not like the Weimar Republic, Germany, where you'd have to get your pay in a wheelbarrow because it was millions of Deutschmarks, and then hurry and go spend them while they still had some buying power. We're not that bad. It's not. It's never that bad in America compared to other places. Even the Great Depression, when my parents were growing up, compared to what was going on in Europe, they had problems, but nothing like what was going on elsewhere.
Yeah, well, Americans are spoiled. I mean, I say that on two of my other shows. Matter of fact, the one coming up on after this, we'll actually be talking about that. We are spoiled. It's just, part of being an American. Why I live here.
When I was a little kid, my grandparents, they obviously grew up through the Depression, and I remember my grandmother gave me a piece of tracing paper that I could use to draw pictures on, and I made a mistake on it. I asked for another piece of paper. I got in so much trouble for wasting a piece of paper.
Yeah,
because of all the paper shortages that happened during that time period that they went through. That I had no appreciation for a piece of paper. It's amazing.
And that wasn't even just the Depression. Paper used to be precious.
Yeah,
it used to be not quite as precious as needles. When people talked about housewives having pin money, it's because you had to have pins in order to sew, in order to hem things up and stuff, and to have like a basting stitch. But it was expensive. You couldn't waste pins. That's why you had a pin cushion. You'd pull them out, put them in the pin cushion, use them again, over and over again. Nowadays, they just give away pins in shirts.
Oh, yeah.
And the real problem there is how to throw them away without having them poke through the plastic garbage bag and stab whoever's taking it out to the cans.
They still aren't that cheap. When I was matter of fact, when I was in LA this year, I ripped the seam out of the bottom. I caught one of my boots and ripped the seam out. So I stopped at Target and picked up a little sewing kit. And yes, people, I can sew. They taught me how to do that when I was in the Navy. Sorry, they make you learn how to sew when you're in boot camp. Don't ask me why, they just do. And anyway, long story short, I got the damn thing, and I'm thinking there was 4 needles in there and maybe, I don't know, 2 feet of thread in 8 different colors or something. That thing was $11. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. I said, oh, maybe because it's Target in LA. I know, man, it was just ridiculous.
Anything in LA.
That's California.
It was just too funny. But
I remember back before Los Angeles rejoined the Union, and all the chain stores that were everywhere, I couldn't find a Circuit City. I couldn't find, back when Circuit City existed, but
yeah,
there were places that I expected to be able to find because it's America. The only one that was always there was McDonald's, but all the other stores, they weren't there because the real estate was so high. They couldn't sell anything at their regular prices and make any money. They'd lose money because of rent.
You can bet your ass the first colony on Mars and on the moon will have a McDonald's in it.
They better. When they had McDonald's in a truck, in a van, following along behind Trump in the Middle East, then they understand a guy with a serious McDonald's addiction.
No, man. I worked for him as a general manager for a while.
What's that?
I actually worked for them for about 5 years as a general manager. I gotta say though, man, I made good money. But I had a beach store. I had a store down on the Gulf Coast in Mississippi. It was a beach store. Back then, it did about $3 million a month, which today would be about $30 million a month. And I got a really good commission off if they pay me really well. And I still remember when I got hired, the guy said, "Well, you got to go to Hamburger College," and I started laughing. I mean, literally, I started laughing. He said, "No, I'm serious." I'm like, "Dude, really?" He's like, "Yeah, we're going to send you up to Chicago for a couple of weeks." And
but unlike regular universities, when you come out of Hamburger College, there's stuff you now know how to do that you didn't before. Whereas normal universities, they give you all the opinions you're supposed to have, but you don't learn how to do much.
Well, it's funny you said it because I got a bachelor's in science and avionics and advanced electronics, and I don't do that for a living. Never have. Matter of fact, it's kind of sad. Very interesting. Learned a lot of fun stuff, but I used it when I was in the Navy. But other than that, I didn't use it anywhere else.
Well, see, that's amazing to me because what that suggests is that your major field of study, which was an engineering-heavy, science-heavy field, you ended up working in it about as much as I ended up working with my theater degree, which, of course, is as close to worthless as you can get in terms of, when they're casting in Hollywood, they don't care if you ever had a degree. That doesn't even come up. If you put it on your resume, it's like a little joke between you and them. yeah, I majored in theater at Brigham Young University, and they'll go, oh, how charming, how cute, he thinks that counts for anything, but it doesn't.
Yeah. All they ever tell me is stand here, sit there, do this. They never tell me what to say though, which is nice. They want, chest out. Man, matter of fact, my very first time I ever did a big shoot was in Washington, D.C., and my beard was gray. I still remember this lady says, well, we can't have him like that. They're talking to we're in D.C., they're talking to the lady in L.A., and I guess she's watching the whole thing. And the guy says, well, she said, you can't have that beard like that. So I'm not shaving my beard off. And she's like, oh, no, they want to dye it. I'm like, wait, what? And I still remember she said that. I said, whatever you do, if you're going to dye my beard, you better not use that shit y'all used on Giuliani. I don't want it running when I'm flying home on the airport. But ever since then, anytime I do a shoot, they expect it. They'll do it themselves, but they expect it dyed. They don't want it.
That is just weird.
They don't want it.
The obsession with
like cuts my face off from here down. I like my white beard.
Yeah. Well, my dad's hair never turned gray. It was dark until his 90s, but his beard was white at about 60. And he loved growing it. My mom hated it, so it was never there for long. But the human body, you never find out what your heredity is until you do stuff like growing a beard.
Well, mine was brown until I met John, so then it turned gray.
Well, that explains a lot. That explains so
there might be
much.
something fishy going on around here. I don't know if that.
So speaking of Ender's Game, you've got a great story. I think that this is one of the books. I mean, I was just amazed. I mean, I knew how much I enjoyed the book when I read it originally, but last year I went with Scott we did an event in Clearwater, a writing conference, and then we went to Dragon Con in Atlanta, and I was just amazed how much Ender's Game had actually impacted. I didn't know to what degree. Yes, people were coming and saying, "This is my son Ender. This is my tattoo from this book," and so just like the story of how he came up with Ender's Game, I think it's something that the people listening now enjoy listening to.
Well, the weird thing is, it's not like I was ever in the military. I actually did study the Civil War like crazy. I read Bruce Catton's Army of the Potomac, which really the overall plot is just Abraham Lincoln searching for a commander who will actually use the army properly. And so I had a lot of information about how bad commanders can be bad and stuff. But I found out the Civil War was over. I found out that if you're going to get into the military, they don't start you out as general. You have to go through this boot camp thing. And as a soft-bodied teenager, I knew I would die in boot camp. I would die. And so there was no chance I was going to do that as a volunteer. But then Vietnam was going on. See, I'm that old. And so I thought I better hold on to my college deferment or I'm going to get trapped in this war that they've already decided to lose. But instead, my draft lottery number came up in the 200s. And so I was safe. There have been times since then that I thought, I wish I had served. I learned later that my body would respond to exercise and that it wouldn't have taken me long in boot camp to get into a decent enough shape that I could function. But I didn't know that then. All I knew was that it would require things like running and lifting. Yeah. And I don't do those things voluntarily, or at least I didn't at that time. It's hard to read a book while running. But anyway, my older brother. Oh, go ahead.
Today you can put them in your glasses. They got the little books, little readers in your glasses, so you can read while you're jogging.
Yeah, but it's still bouncing. It's still bouncing up and down. There's no way. I've tried reading.
Running through a car, man.
Audiobooks. I
love audiobooks. Now, I'm a big audiobook fan.
But on my 16th birthday in 1967, my older brother, who was home on leave from the Army, which he had joined, because there was no way his grades were going to get him a college deferment for more than 20 minutes. And so he knew he was going to get drafted, so he volunteered, because then you can choose your own assignment. And he chose South Korea. But on my birthday, he and his girlfriend, who's now his wife, gave me a wonderful book called Foundation and its sequel, Second Foundation. They didn't know there was a book in between those two because, of course, how could Second Foundation be the third book? That is insane. But they gave me the first two, and so I skipped the second book. I finished the first book, get to the second book, and they're all talking about this guy called the Mule. I have never heard of because I didn't read Foundation and Empire. Anyway, when I read Foundation, I was blown away. This was absolutely wonderful stuff. I'd read some science fiction. I'd read some Ray Bradbury, but these are all short stories. And even though Foundation was written as short stories or novelettes or novellas that were then put together, it was one coherent story. And I came away thinking, man, I want to be able to write something like this. Can I think of a science fiction idea? And so what I thought of was the battle room that ended up being so central to the events in Ender's Game. Because I thought, how do you train people to think and act in zero G without constantly losing half your recruits wandering off into space and never being able to find them again? And so I decided that you do it in a large enclosed space and nobody dies and they get to reorient themselves so that they can think in 3D, in zero G. And I knew I wasn't ready to write it. It was too good an idea to waste on a bad story. So I held that. I lived in Brazil for a couple of years, worked on the idea from time to time, thought of new extrapolations in the battle room. But then finally, riding up to Salt Lake City from Orem, where I lived, with a sort of kind of almost girlfriend who is now married to my brother, a different brother. So we keep it all in the family. But yeah, but she had to drive to take her boss's children to the circus. Now that's just, you don't think of that as a condition of employment. It wasn't in her job description, but she was taking them to the circus, and I rode along. But of course, there was no ticket for me, so I was out on the lawn at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City. And I thought, you know what? They would, I had spent an hour with kids in a car, and I thought they wouldn't bother waiting to train you for zero G till you were an adult. You'd have too many bad habits. They got to grab you when you're a kid, when you're still flexible in the way that you see the world. And that was when I decided for the first time that the trainees would be children and not adults. And then I sat down and I'd done all my playwriting in notebooks by hand. And so as if it were going to be a play, began with dialogue. Remember, the enemy's gate is down. And from there, just sort of winged it until I'm never sure if winging it, the past tense, is winged or wung. It should be wung. I wung it.
It doesn't sound right.
Sounds like Albert Fudd now.
and a few pages later, I had Ender's Game. My mom typed it up for me because she did that with my plays too. She's the only person who could read my handwriting because I couldn't even. But wrote it up and sent it off, and that was the beginning of. I wish I could say that it sold immediately. Ben Bova saw it at Analog and said, "It needs to be cut in half," and the title should be Professional Soldier. Ender's Game doesn't mean anything to anybody. Nobody knows who that is. But Professional Soldier, that'll be ironic and I thought that sounds like a generic title. So I submitted it to somebody else. Jim Bain kept it at Galaxy for about 6-8 months before rejecting it flat out. At least Ben had given me the hope that if I cut it in half, he'd read it. But it's one of those things that writers have to learn. Editors have no idea how to fix your story. So what you do when you get an instruction like cut it in half is you think, why did he want me to cut it in half? Because it felt long. Not because it was too long. I don't write long. I don't write extra stuff. If it's in my manuscript, it's because it needs to be there and can't be cut, which was the bane of the existence of people abridging my books back in the days when audiobooks all were abridged. And because there was nothing they could cut. It was all there because it had to be. And so I was thinking, So he thought it felt long. What made it feel long? And I realized too many battles. Nowadays, I would say too much Quidditch, because since then, we've had the Harry Potter books come out, but they didn't exist yet. So I realized these are all play games. Nobody's going to actually die. And so I went and I removed one game entirely and just summarized it very quickly, and took another one and cut the description of it way down, the events way down, so that I had 3 full games, I think. Maybe I got the total wrong. And then the other ones were much briefer. And it felt shorter. It made the story less tedious. But I also fiddled in some other areas. So when I sent the manuscript in to Ben again, it was actually a page longer than it had been before I cut it in half. And so I didn't remind him, you said to cut this in half. What I said was, I addressed the issues you raised. And the title is Ender's Game, period. He published it as Ender's Game, even though he thought I was making a mistake. I don't think I did. And then he bought it because I'd solved the problem. It no longer felt like it was twice as long as it needed to be. But that's just writer stuff. We all learn that. When Ellen Datlow was editing at Omni, I think it was at the time, she once sent me a really bizarre set of suggestions, and I could not fathom what she was going for. So I paid no attention to them at all, looked through the story and found things I wanted to alter, and again sent it back saying, well, I addressed the issues that had come up in the previous draft. I hope that this draft will meet your approval. She had no idea. She didn't remember what she had told me before, because it was incomprehensible to her as well. And so she was fine. She felt like she had contributed to the story because I sent it back and it wasn't quite the same. Editors don't remember stuff like that. They just don't. And so it's a great deal of freedom for the writer, as long as you have the conscientiousness to address any issues that really are there. But here's the bizarre thing. With Ender's Game, it was all centered around the military. I think partly because my brother had been on leave when he gave me Foundation, and because of Nordhoff and Hall's book about World War I flyers in France, the Lafayette Escadrille. And and in that book, they talked about how first-time pilots up in the air, first dogfight, first action with an enemy, they had a tendency to die because they were still thinking in a level plane. If you're in a car and you're looking for other traffic, you're not looking up, you're not looking down. You only look in a level plane outside your windows. The mirrors help. But if you're up in an airplane, the guy who's going to kill you is going to come from below or from above or out of the sun. And they found that out as they died, because they simply had not looked there. So that was the initiative for my making people try to think in 3D, because it's even worse there. At least in an airplane, you always know where down is, because you have to. You don't want to go that direction unless it's on purpose. And, going down is death. But in the battle room, going down was a natural orientation your body has to have. We have to know where down is. And so all of these things were me trying to extrapolate what it would be like to train people for military service, for command in the future in space. And so I had to invent all these moves and stuff that they would do. And I just, where would I find out the physics of movement in 0G? I had to imagine it all. So one of the happiest moments of my writing career was when a shuttle astronaut wrote to me and said, we tried all the moves from the battle room in the cargo bay, which says, okay, so they did have a little free time there in the shuttle. We tried them in the cargo bay in 0G, and they all worked. You have no idea how happy that made me, because it meant that my physics was not stupid. Of course, later on, when they were making the quote movie, unquote, about quote Ender's Game, unquote, because Ender's Game has never been filmed. never been filmed, probably never will be. But they had this tall teenager playing short little Ender Wiggin, and all kinds of other crap. But I remember the director, whose name I try not to remember, brought me in to look at the early CGI of movement in the battle room. And so he showed me this, that this character leapt out from the door and then did a glancing blow against an obstacle in the middle and caromed off as if it were a ping pong ball, caroming off the side of the table. And I just had to laugh out loud. I said, come on. This isn't a car that has four wheels on the ground. You can sideswipe something in a car and rebound. But if you're a human figure and you land face down onto an obstacle, friction will grab that front of you and slow it down, but the rest of you is still going the same speed. So you flip over head over heels with on ridiculousness they call a scorpion, and you'll break your neck. Your neck is now broken. You are paralyzed or dead. And so what you just showed me was the death of a kid in battle school. He had said before, say whatever you want. It's early days. We can change anything. Whenever somebody in Hollywood says that to you, it is a lie. They are completely married to what they've already done. And your only job is to say, great, that looks so fantastic. You aced it. You've done it. But he hadn't. He'd gotten the physics all wrong. Now, we happened to be in the room with the guys who actually did the CGI. And I saw them responding to what I said, nodding slightly, smiling a little. They knew I was right. They had probably told this moron about the physics, that this could not work. Said, that's why in the book, I always have them grab and hold at every obstacle they run into, and then move on, push off again in the direction they want, because you can't rebound. Anyway, that turned the director into my enemy, because I had humiliated him in front of the CGI guys by backing up what they said and laughing at how stupid it was. But I couldn't help it. I mean, that was just a reflex. I'm not a nice person. I laugh at people who make stupid mistakes, proudly make stupid mistakes. But I make stupid mistakes too, but I expect people to laugh at me. They always do. And so that was when he became my enemy. And in all the things that I had said to him that were important to me, that they never happen in the movie version of Ender's Game, he put them all in his script that he wrote. Every single thing. He turned Petra into a love interest. There was a kiss between Ender and Petra. Well, that works with Asa Butterfield, who was, I think, 20 at the time. Well, probably 15 or 16. But it would not work with Ender Wiggin in the book. And other stuff like an anti-military diatribe. Fortunately, that was cut from the film because there was a good executive at the studio that came in and provided the final funding. And I explained this to him, and I said, I don't know who this director thinks the audience for Ender's Game is, but an awful lot of them are people who served in the military and were introduced to Ender's Game because it was on the commandant's reading list with the Marine Corps. And the military loves Ender's Game, partly because it shows stupid commanders being stupid, which is an experience that all military people have. You were in the Navy. Come on, tell me. How many of your commanders were smart? And how many of them did dumb stuff? But I'd read Army of the Potomac, and I knew that there were all kinds of commanders.
In all frankness, I because when I finally made officer, how some people even became an officer was beyond me. Honestly, some of the people I met, I was on the Nimitz. I was like, I'm looking at the guy who's a deck commander because I was a flight commander. He's out there one day. I said, what are you trying to get everybody killed? I said, what are you doing standing in the middle of the I said, how long have you been on this carrier? 3 years. I said, 3 years. And you're standing in the middle of the flight deck while we're launching jets. I said, you know what? I'm just, you know what I did? I said, you know what? I'm just going to walk around. You outrank me by, and I walked back to my place. And he just looked at me like, And then you all of a sudden you hear F-14 Tomcat's engines raring. I'm getting ready to go. And I'm watching this dude thinking, this guy's going to get cut in half. And I think he was almost going to try to stand there to show me that he could.
Oh, man.
but the Tomcat pilot was like, well, guess what? Well, because, once the speed guy releases them, they don't care who's standing there.
Yeah. They can't care of it. When you're being catapulted off faster than your plane can go at that point, there's no way you're not going to turn. You're not going to dodge. If you turn, you end up in the water.
And I'm standing behind the guy waiting for him to release, and I'm looking at this guy. I'm looking down at the guy. He's looking at the guy. I'm looking at the guy. The pilot's looking at the guy. We're all thinking, and I see your boy go. And I'm thinking, oh shit, you're dead. And you just see this guy turn around. He just started stepping. He got hit with the backwash. Almost knocked his ass off the carrier. The funniest thing is, Scott, I don't remember seeing him after that. I think because they watch you from the tower, and I'm thinking I think you might have just got thrown off the ship.
Yeah,
because it's dangerous and you can't be an idiot. And unfortunately, it's weird when you're in certain situations. You don't see as many idiots, but in some places, like when I was stationed in San Diego, oh my God. I think it's like the capital of idiots for the U.S. Navy. People were just like in a whole different world. I think that was the woke Navy, and I just didn't realize what woke was back then. I really don't. It was scary, but anyway.
I don't know when you were in the Navy, but woke was really a pretty recent addition.
Oh, I know, that's what I'm saying. But I was
took a long time to get to the military.
But it felt like that in San Diego. I was there from 80 to 89.
Oh,
well, I wasn't actually
pre-woke.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And but anytime I was there, because usually, I was there for a little while. Then I was in Millington, Tennessee for a while. Then I was on the carrier for a while, and then I was in New Orleans for a while. Then I was back in San Diego for a while. Then I was back on the carrier for a while. Then I was in Fallon, Nevada for a while. It was just like because of the skill set I had, they sent me all over the place. Even though I
gotta say, you're in the Navy. And you spend significant time in Tennessee.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, look, I said that myself. I used to say, wait a minute. I still remember this. When they said, you're going to Millington, Tennessee for school. I'm like, Tennessee? I said, Tennessee's landlocked, right, people? I said, well, how am I getting there? He said, you're flying. I'm like, but there's no water. He's like, Joe, not all of our bases. He said, not all of our bases are on the coast. I'm like, why? I said, we're the Navy. Aren't we the Navy? He said, well, we got one up there in Lake Michigan. I said, yeah, but it's by Lake Michigan. At least there's water.
Yeah. No, I remember when I first read about the Von Trapp family singers, I was shocked to realize that the guy was a commander in the Austrian Navy. Now, to me, Austria was this little landlocked country tucked under the butt end of Germany. How did they have a Navy? Well, of course, they used to have a seacoast, but after World War I, they lost it. But still, the idea of an Austrian Navy officer was just laughable to me. But, the Navy, what it means is that there were powerful congressmen on appropriations or on the Defense Committee who decided that they needed to have some of that wonderful Navy money getting spent in Tennessee. Probably Al Gore's dad arranged to have that school going on there.
Yeah,
anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, your book's got to be perfect for a lot of these commanders. I mean, it's just, it's, I was thinking about it. This is something they're going to be looking to do probably in maybe 2 decades, maybe 3. We already have plans on putting a place on the moon sometime in the next 30 years. I think they said the commission starts.
Our plans for the moon will, as things are going right now, will make us 20 years too late, because China has plans for the moon.
Yes, they do. But unfortunately, they're doing it with Russia. So that's going to slow things down, like we learned.
Well, you're right. If they're doing it with Russia. But the thing is, when the Chinese build something, it usually works. Yeah. And if they take that prime spot near the lunar South Pole that has easily accessible oxygen, so that they can be self-sustaining, so they don't have to keep shipping, lifting oxygen off of Earth in order to bring it to the moon. That's going to be the prime spot. And once they're there, our military is dead because we are so dependent now on satellite communications. And from the moon, they can throw things, they can throw rocks at our satellites and destroy them. And, to talk about, we're so used to now orienting everything to what we can see through satellites. And suddenly we're blind if they can wipe out our satellites. So I'm happy about Space Force. Hope they can do something.
No, let me think about this for a second. I gotta make sure I ain't breaking no clearance here. So there's a thing called Thor. I don't know if you've ever heard about it.
A thing called what?
It's called Thor. The Navy and the Air Force put this in space.
Thor, like that.
So this is past the moon. This is to protect our GPS satellites. This is what this is for, because people don't realize how far out some of our GPS are. So these are to protect our GPS from people like Russia and China. But Thor is a sneaky little thing, because all they are is tungsten rods. They're nothing else. They just shoot them. They're ejected. I think they're ejected by air, actually. So they just shoot out. But the thing is, they miss and they hit Earth. One of them is enough to level Moscow. One of them. Because of where it's coming from and the speed it's traveling when it gets here. So it's one of these things. Okay, it was a brilliant idea. No chemicals, no nothing. And I kind of wonder where they got that idea from, to be honest with you. But
that's the moon is a harsh mistress. Come on, that was Robert Heinlein. We all know about throwing rocks at Earth.
There's also you've had James Rosone on as a guest, Joe, in his series that he did where China actually began World War III. They ended up with Space Force with these tungsten rods taking out the base where they had the supercomputer in China that was running all the AI and doing all the bad stuff that was being done.
Yeah.
But it was with these tungsten rods but they had the Space Force and they had their jets that they had there that were basically up in outside of radar range, way high up, that they could send these things down and it would create earthquakes to destroy it. But that's the kind of power that these things had.
Well, they've got. I got a friend that works with Boeing, but I've seen some of the original drawings. So the ones they use for satellites are only about 15 feet long and probably about 3, maybe 4 inches around. They have what they call city busters that are roughly, they're about 175 yards long and about 6 feet thick. Launched from anywhere beside outside the moon. When they hit the planet, they're going to do but the thing about it is there's no radiation. You flatten the thing and then you just take it over. There's nothing to keep you from going back. It's just one big ass hole.
There's 2 years of atmospheric dust,
yes,
of course.
At least.
Basically it's duplicating the extinction of the dinosaurs, only we're the dinosaurs.
Yeah, it's just a controlled extinction is basically what this is.
For me, the destructive power, you can retaliate, but how are you going to actually protect those satellites? And my answer is you invent completely generic reprogrammable satellites that can do any of the satellite jobs.
You mean like the ones Elon's putting into space?
Exactly. So that you have 500 of them ready to launch. You have a whole bunch of them already out of Earth's gravity well. They knock out 15 satellites, and in a day, you have new satellites with the correct programming in place to replace them. It still gives them 1 day in which we're blind on Earth, our soldiers and our ships. But after that day, we're back up and running. But those completely replaceable satellite units are vital. And I don't hear anybody but me talking about it.
Well, no, see, that's already been implemented there. That's what I'm saying. So Elon Musk, when he put up Starlink, right now he has 8,650 Starlink satellites in space. He already told Putin, if you're ever ignorant enough to launch a nuke, he said, I will knock every nuke you got out of the sky. He said, I can just run into them and knock them out the way. He said, you cannot get nukes to the United States, not intercontinental ballistics. He said, I will knock them down. Every satellite he puts up there are communication satellites that are completely reprogrammable. And a lot of people seem to think that he's got something else on those satellites that he's not telling us, because he's got some kind of deal with Space Command. And only reason they have a deal with Space Command is if they were weaponized.
Yeah.
That there's no other reason for it. And I do know that Space Command did take over DARPA. DARPA has to answer to Space Command So DARPA is now
So
part of
you're talking about Space Force.
Yeah, Space Force. They always call it Space Command. I don't know why I do this. It's one of the things, but it's but right now they're all answering to it. And I know when Trump signed the last one in 2018, the U.S. Air Force Space Program and the U.S. Navy Space Program are supposed to report to them anytime they're doing certain types of launches. Most people in the United States don't even know that military has its own space program.
No,
they never talk about it.
The whole idea of Space Force was new to me. It had been in existence for 5 years before I ever learned about it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a great thing, but it was I just didn't know how it was going to work.
Of course,
but
right now, knowing that how secretive the military can be, I don't know of any Space Force people who are off Earth, who are actually in space. And Space Force ain't Space Force till it's got some force in space. That's
a good point. They ought to at least send one to the frickin' space shot
the ISS. But the thing that gets me is it's like in World War II, where we were hoping that they had a secret weapon, and guess what? They did. We had a secret weapon. I'm kind of hoping that they just aren't.
Oh, we've got several secret weapons.
How many people are out there already in space doing jobs?
It depends who you want to believe. So if you go by Jimmy Carter, science advisor, we've had a base on Mars since '79.
Base what?
On Mars since '79. That's what Jimmy Carter science. Yeah, he said since '79 we've had a presence on Mars since '79. He said that they keep a satellite in zone L11, which is between the moon and Mars, because it's the best launching location in our solar system. So they established something there. I wasn't sure about that until I talked to a friend of mine. Matter of fact, I was having lunch with Edgar Mitchell and Buzz Aldrin at the Washington Press Club. And I just asked them if they heard anything about it, and they both just went, "No." I said, "So you did hear something about it?" He said, "Well," he said, "What is your clearance again?" He said, "How did you find this out?" I said, "I'm just asking." And they wouldn't talk about it because whatever it is was highly classified.
No, they can't. They don't want to lose their job and their freedom, because there's stuff that if you talk about it, you don't just get fired; you go to jail.
Oh, you go to
and should kind of like if you were to write "kill Trump" in the sand.
Yes,
on a
like
beach,
that.
And then
I'm still hoping that SOP goes to jail. I'll be talking about him on the next show. Matter of fact.
Yeah, so somebody it was on Gutfeld. One of the people said, what James Comey needs is he's
a prison inmate.
Comfort animal, and then Tyrus says he doesn't need a comfort animal, he needs a cellmate.
Yes, like the one.
And I thought that was funny, but. No, we live in really weird times, but
we do.
There are people who know how to keep secrets, and they're keeping them. They're just rare in government.
I was thinking about you a lot. It was a couple of weeks ago. There's a TV series called Expanse, and for some reason, when I'm watching this series, there's something about this. Whoever wrote this must have had some kind of influence by Ender's Game. Just I don't know how to explain it. There just seems to be pieces and parts in there.
No.
That made me think about you. Matter of fact, we were just talking about the rock. Well, that's one of the things they actually do in there. They're taking big asteroids from way out in space and flinging them at Earth with stealth on them so you can't see them, and smashing and killing 2 million people at a time. But anyway, it's
only 2 million.
I think it was 2 million. But it would just.
I haven't been following the series, but it's a friend of mine who is part of the team that is.
Oh, well, maybe that's why, because there are definitely things in there. And it's a weird series because season 1's pretty good. Season 2 and 3 are really good. Season 4.
Kind of like what you're saying is like most television series.
Yes. I mean, season 1 is like everything, it's just character build in the first season. Season 3 is probably the best out of the gate. And then 5 and 6 are pretty good. But 4 and a half of 5 are kind of like were y'all smoking something when y'all were writing this? It just slowed down to such an extent that it was, the first 3 seasons are like, wow, let me knock you on your ass. And then all of a sudden you come into this season and you're kind of like, okay.
Like the 3rd season of Lost, where they really
that's a good one. Yeah.
Lost is a unique thing in television history because it began with a network executive's idea about the plane wreck. and he assigned it to writers, and they basically threw everything in the kitchen sink into that first season. But they had no idea what was really going on themselves. They could not wrap it all up. And we realized that in season 4, they were desperate. They were flailing. And when they had to get rid of the kid because the actor was aging too fast. So they set him up to be really important. And then they had to fire him and get him off the island because he could not continue to play that character when it had only been a month in movie time, in showtime. Anyway, television is weird, but we live in the golden age of television right now, when there have been a handful of series where the writing was so good and the acting was so good that there is no dead season. You know, if you're binge watching all 22 seasons of NCIS, there's not a season you skip because they're all needed. They're all good. The writing never flagged. Same thing with Bones. It only lasted 12 seasons, but all 12 were wonderful. And every episode is worth rewatching. And I know because I've watched them all now about 5 times each, because they're on in constant reruns. And I'm an old man and I like sitting in my chair. And when I look up from my writing, I like to have a show on so that I can follow their show for a while. If I'm going to have a show on influencing me, it better be a well-written show or it'll poison what I do. So I guess I'm piggybacking off of good writing on television. But, you know, compared with anything in the so-called golden age of TV, you know, I Love Lucy is kind of an awful show. I find it, even when I was a kid and it was new episodes, I never thought it was funny. There's an episode where Desi spanks Lucy, spanks her. I was horrified. My dad would never have done that with my mom. He was too good a man, and she was too good a woman to ever have that be their relationship. I hated I Love Lucy. Terrible show. But hey, that's the one that they say is the epitome of the golden age of TV. We're in the golden age right now.
Yeah.
Speaking of golden age, we got the golden age of science fiction. And so we also have, from way back when, because part of what we're scheduled this Quill for is because we also have Memorial Weekend next weekend, which we were originally trying to have you on here for, but you're going to be with your family next weekend. So we pulled you forward to this weekend here. One of the stories was the book Final Blackout that Owen Hubbard wrote, which you gave an amazing, kudo for, Scott. But that I've sent around a few other authors, and some of them come in saying like, I guess I can give the best the best kudo I could possibly give for any book is I wish I would have written this myself, from another dystopian science fiction author, and Heinlein called it one of the best pieces of science fiction I've ever written.
And that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, because it was written before World War II, and so what he put in there was just so outrageous. He was accused of being a communist. He was accused of being a fascist because of what he did. He talked about, how this lieutenant, this unnamed officer, who saved his people and was rebuilding UK. And then here comes this big warship, United States, and the senator coming in with his big grandiose pomposity to offer, all this stuff. He says, we don't need it. We're doing fine. We're doing this and this and this. And, but they wanted, because they had their own problems in the United States, they wanted to come there because they wanted more property to be able to, get their food from and take their excess people to. It was it's an amazing story what it did and what it created. As Jerry Riddle, A.G. Riddle, just gave an amazing comment on it, saying that this was a book that preceded dystopian fiction. Was it heralded that as a genre.
Now, I at the risk of committing a spoiler, this is, after all, nearly 100-year-old book, but it's still, I don't want to wreck the ending, but I've got to say that it was It was an experience like when I read the science fiction novel Vandenberg, and even reading The Stand by Stephen King. There are these characters, you come to care about them, you love them, you want things to work out for them. And in The Stand, they set up to try to stop the bad guy from doing his terrible work, and they completely fail, which is not, by the way, the ending of Final
Black
Blackout.
Ops,
But they fail completely. And in Vandenberg, I just remember being devastated. And in The Stand, I just thought, I was so frustrated because he still has the good guys win, because the finger of God appears in the sky and blows up the nuclear missile. Excuse me, but that's not science fiction. The moment the finger of God gets involved, that's religious fiction. But that's fine. Stephen King didn't claim it was science fiction. It just worked like science fiction all the rest of the way. But it's frustrating to a reader when the plans don't work. If you're going to have a caper, if you're going to have some kind of plot that the good guys are doing, as a reader, you want to have it work, not because you think that all plans work, but because you think, if you're going to tell me about somebody's ornate plan, why don't you tell me about one that works, not about one that fails? But here's the thing that L. Ron Hubbard was able to do in this wonderful novel. Even failure can be success. And he makes it plausible that losing can be winning, just as winning can be losing. And this character, the lieutenant, I wish that he had named him, because there would be a generation of people named after him, I believe. But you can't name your kid lieutenant. Well, you can. There's a guy, there was a little trait of people for a time. I had an uncle, Major. His name was Major. It reminds me of Catch-22 with the guy whose name was Major, because he was a major and his name was Major. I knew a Mormon guy with the last name Bishop, and he was a bishop. So he was Bishop. And so, but whatever the name, nobody's going to name their kid lieutenant. It's just not a high enough rank. You're going to name them general or major or something. But what I loved was, without ever naming him, this character was already legendary from chapter 1 and only got more so as time went on. And Hubbard was doing in his book, which I had not read until recently, what I did in Ender's Game, which is, what makes a good commander? What makes a commander that someone would die for? Someone would willingly place themselves in the path of the bullet to save. Or you go over the top from the trenches in World War I because he said to. Who does? I mean, we know that the French army mutinied against their really stupid learn-nothing commanders in World War I. And that was what Hubbard was working with, was the experience of World War I. Mm-hmm. And he was able to show what a good commander would be, even in impossible no-win circumstances. And that was really what I was trying to do with Ender. And I think that in Ender's Game, I more or less succeeded, but I didn't have the spunk to do what Hubbard did and take it to a level. I mean, he took it to a level that I would not have dared to try, because he was braver than me. Plus, he also had a lot of money then compared to what I have. But this Ender's Game was my first short story sale in science fiction, and so I had to have things work out differently. But writing about the military, when I've never been in the military, Hubbard he had close associations. He knew what he was talking about. I had to extrapolate everything from what other people wrote, since I had never been in the military. And that's one of the hard things about writing is, especially when you're writing things in the future, you're going to write societies that never existed yet, that are not there. And that can be so bizarre, because there are people in the real military who could look at Ender's Game and say, what an idiot, that's not how it works. And I knew that. I knew that I was writing into a culture that exists and that I was going to get it wrong because I wasn't in that culture.
Yeah.
I had the similar thing with a book I wrote called Enchantment, where all of the characters are blacks in LA in an upper middle class neighborhood, Baldwin Hills in LA. Upper middle class black is not something you get written about. What you get is lots of lower class ghetto black in the movies, but upper middle class, no. And so I had a friend who had urged me to write a black protagonist, who was the actual real life hero of the book. And the way that I made sure that I didn't cheat was I simply had almost no white people, no named white people in the entire book. But, I've never been black all my life. Never even tried to be black. I'm not one of the wannabes. And I knew that I could not write black characters. But my friend, Roland Brown, supplied me with details that made it ring true. And I was able to not fake it, but create a story set in that black neighborhood of Baldwin Hills. And it had to be Baldwin Hills because there was a location there, since now transformed, but at the time, a location that absolutely lent itself to my plot. And my editor at the time was married to a black man. I did not know that. So she gave him the manuscript to read. And he came back and said, I did not know that Orson Scott Card was black. and that was my imprimatur of, I made it, I did it because it sounded real to somebody in that culture. And that's what I hoped I could do with Ender's Game. That's what I absolutely believe in the pre-World War II era, L. Ron Hubbard did in Final Blackout, that he absolutely made it real, even though it was set in a then future that did not and never has existed, which is total anarchy, World War I descending into total anarchy, and nations falling left and right, which they did. So anyway, I admire what he achieved, but it's always a challenge to write outside your own culture. Now, if I write an alien culture that has never existed and has no members on Earth, I'm fine, right? They'll be whatever I want them to be. But the second I write a culture that exists or is related to a culture on Earth, I'm in trouble if I don't get it right.
Yeah, it's just for, because this is one of the books we're talking about. We got Ender's Game, we got Final Blackout here. We have the author of Ender's Game below on the screen here, and then we got myself representing the author, L. Ron Hubbard, on Final Blackout. But just so you know, on Amazon, this is on special right now. Amazon put it down, and it's part of the recognizing the upcoming Memorial weekend, and they wanted to have this as one of the books that they offered as part of the Memorial Day offers that they're doing. So, but it's just interesting because he's this is what it just continued to get an amazing reviews on it. But when he wrote this thing, he came out with it in originally in 1940, and then it was republished again in 1948, and that's where he then did a dedication to the men and officers with whom I served in World War II, first phase, 1941 to 1945, because it was just because what was experienced at that time too was Korea. After World War II was over, then these officers that were there in World War II were experiencing that Korea was now escalating. And so that's where he's referring it to phase one. And that's where also you had like some of the science fiction writers like Heinlein and Hubbard met at Heinlein's home in Los Angeles to start conceiving of science fiction that took man's attention into space and took attention, trying to create a space race instead of an arms race, which was really going with what the Cold War was. That the United States lost to Russia, on the space race with the Sputnik beating it, but it created that whole thing in '69. Finally culminated, and then once they were done, they kind of like we were done with that, and then just dropped the whole thing on space until Space Force. But this is this whole thing that he was doing with Final Blackout was also because he was pretty good on satire, and so he did a lot of his science fiction was satirical, and I'm sure you've experienced it too in what you write, Scott. But it's just he just goes in there. So then he goes on to say, Final Blackout dealt rather summarily and very harshly, for the author was inexperienced in international affairs, that the anarchy of nations was an unhealthy arrangement maintained by the greed of a few for the privileges of few, and that the common people, which is to say those uncommon people who were only to be let go about their affairs of getting enough to eat and begetting their next generation, would be knocked flat, silly, and completely out of existence by these brand new defensive weapons, which would of course be turned only against soldiers. Bombs, atomics, germs, and in short, science, it maintained were being used unhealthily, and that soon enough, a person here and there who was no party to the frontline sortie was liable to get injured or dusty. It also spoke of populations being affected boomerang fashion by weapons devised for their own governments to use. Certainly all this was heresy enough in that quiet world of 1939, and since that time it is only fair to state the author has served here and there and has gained enough experience to see the error of his judgment. Everything, it can be said with Pangloss, so far as has been for the best in this best of all possible worlds. There have been 2 or 3 stories modeled in Final Blackout. I am flattered. It is just a story, and as the past few years proved, it cannot possibly happen. But I just let the last part of his preface right there. He goes through several things that he predicted in that story that came to pass, which was assured by governments and stuff that there's no way it couldn't happen, but that actually did in fact happen.
Well, there's so many. I remember being on a science fiction panel in 1987 where we were talking about what would happen in the future. And this was still Cold War season. And I said on the panel, out loud in front of God and everybody, that the only reason that the Soviet Union persists, because it has been near collapse ever since it was created. I said the only reason it persists is because the people tolerate it. And they tolerate it in large part because they like seeing half the globe being pink, the color on atlases and globes of the Soviet Union. Oh, I was almost laughed out of the room by the other panelists. They said, that's not true at all. And I said, look, the Soviet Union can fall in a second anytime the people stop supporting it. And in 1989, my prediction was completely borne out, but it sounded ludicrous in 1987. And if in 1987 I had written the events of 1989 with the fall of the Soviet Union and Tiananmen Square in China and etc., no one would have published it. It would have been too unbelievable. You had to live through it in order to believe it. And even then, I still think back and go, how? Who knew? And, I guessed some aspects of it, but it's predicting the actual future, that Nostradamus business. It only works if you write really vaguely and then other people interpret it to mean things that have already happened, because you can't actually predict what will happen. I have a short story that is coming out in some book, anyway, that is about Space Force fighting on the moon to take over the Chinese base there. And, of course, this is a provocative story if anybody took me seriously, but they don't. So, China's not going to send an assassin to get me for having written this story. But at the same time, I thought it was worth pointing out that the Chinese people don't necessarily love their government. The Russian people don't necessarily love Putin. Pollsters have gone into Gaza in previous years and found out that the population overwhelmingly supports Hamas. Except that's not true. You know that it's only because when the pollsters go around, Hamas sends somebody else after them to find out what they said. So nobody wants to say anything bad about Hamas because they'll be killed. And so polls are meaningless in a circumstance like that, but they can certainly create the illusion that the people are behind them. And there's so many
place that suffers that with polls. Hillary Clinton had it, 20 points ahead?
Oh, yeah.
And I still predicted she was going to get her ass kicked.
Well, I want you to know I still predict that she will win in 2016. So I know she still feels that way. So
yeah. Yes.
The thing is, isn't it funny how in that campaign her health looked like she was on her last legs? And here it is 8 years later, and she's still actually looking healthier and stronger than she did then. So it's you never know what people are going to do, what they're going to be, how they're going to last. She may yet be president for all I know. You just can't predict it. Who in the world in 2014 would have said, Donald Trump, that guy who was so frequently a guest on Letterman, he's going to be president. He's going to run for president. He's going to win. And liberal as he's always been, he's going to run as a Republican and win. And no one would have believed it. But then after he was defeated, if anyone then had said, he'll be back, he'll be president 4 years from now, nobody would have taken that seriously. The things that happen in reality are so horribly implausible that you just, how does a science fiction writer function? I know how. Set it 30,000 years in the future. That's how you do it.
Oh, don't cheat now. That's cheating, man. That's cheating.
You have to be believable.
So look, they're good.
Be believable.
But there are good near now sci-fi writers out there. There's several good series, or has been several good series, and a couple good movies.
Like I said, James is I enjoy his work. It's scary, but I enjoy it. That's.
I mean, I like all sci-fi, so it's it's how it is. But I like near now better than anything.
Well, we have had some brilliant science fiction movies after decades and decades of crap. Because even the ones that people loved were crappy. The science was crap. The future prediction was crap. Their depiction of human societies were crap. But my first science fiction movie that I loved was Deep Impact. I love that movie still. I can't not watch it if I pass by it flipping channels, because it has people in it, people who behave like people. And when Téa Leoni's character declines her seat on the helicopter and gives it to the woman who had played such a villain on LA Law, so we were predisposed to not like her, but we ended up liking her a lot, and her child. And that moment was so moving. And when she goes to her dad, I think this is real human life. They managed to take a sci-fi premise and make it real. When you compare it with Armageddon, the other asteroid hitting Earth, or coming toward Earth movie, which is shallow as can be.
It's a campy movie.
Yeah, it is. And it has actors who were capable of better. They did the best they could with what the writers gave them. But then, of course, we know the best science fiction movie of all time. For a while, I thought it was going to be Serenity, but it was surpassed and by Arrival. Oh my gosh! Who thought?
Which Arrival? There's like 5 Arrivals now.
Amy Adams.
Okay.
The aliens wrote in smoky air these circular. It was a truly alien language, like I've never seen. I assume that was Ted Chiang's doing, because there was a real science fiction writer behind it. But every aspect of that show was believable. And even when it turned out to be a time travel paradox show, which is impossible in my view, can't be done. Time runs one direction continually. And it's one of those things that I argue with theologians about, when they say, well, God exists outside of time. I go, there is no outside of time. If God does anything, if God exists, if he does anything, then there was the time before he did it and the time after he did it. And you can't escape that. God is inside of time. if he ever does anything. If he does nothing, then it doesn't matter that he exists, does it? So those are theological arguments. People who believe in God know what I'm talking about. People who don't care, don't care. But it's still, if you want to say that somebody or something is outside of time, you're lying. Because
maybe outside the dimension. I don't know about outside of time.
No. We'll see, however they say it, but it's still everybody is in time. We're all in time, and that's one of the things that science fiction can't get away from. We love our time travel stories. I've written so many of them myself, where, you know, in fact, I have a trilogy that I wrote whose whole point was I broke every single time travel rule that had developed in science fiction. Every single one of them. It was my project was to make them all false and still make the novel work. I hope I succeeded. I think I did. But anyway, we get these consensus ideas. This is what cyberpunk was originally about before it was called that. Bruce Sterling was the one who said, we all live in this science fiction consensus future. We're all setting our stories in what amounts to the same future with the same machines, the same storylines. He said, we need somebody to invent a new future. He said, for instance, look at the work of this guy, William Gibson, who I think Bruce didn't even know then. He's writing stories that don't owe anything to that consensus science fiction future. And so what happens? Well, cyberpunk becomes the new consensus science fiction future. Every problem that Bruce Sterling pointed out just changed to cyberpunk and still existed and was still a weakness in the field, because we all follow each other like sheep. But, you know, when L. Ron Hubbard was writing science fiction, there was no science fiction. I mean, there was, but it was blowing up planets with Doc Cummings. It was not plausible real-world scenarios in a chaotic Europe, still fighting World War I 20 years later. He was inventing something new, and inventing something genuinely new it's hard and it's scary, and it can be forgotten. I mean, the book Final Blackout has, you know, it has existed for a long time. I had never heard of it. It had no standing in the field. I mean, it had been forgotten. Not really. I mean, there were, if anybody who'd read it was not going to forget this book, but it wasn't talked about. It's like Time magazine came out with its 100 greatest, most influential fantasy novels, and they managed to do a list of modern fantasies that did not include Patricia McKillop. I thought, what idiot made this list and didn't put in The Forgotten Beasts of Eld and The Riddlemaster of Hed and The Throne of the Errol of Cheryl, which stand head and shoulders above most of the books on that list. And they didn't even know it existed. That's what sometimes happens. Patricia McKillop was not running around touting her own stuff. She's a mild, soft-spoken person. L. Ron Hubbard had the disadvantage with Final Blackout of being dead and therefore not doing appearances to talk about Final Blackout. Writers can be forgotten while they're still alive, even, because their work isn't the stuff being talked about. It's not hot.
You're only as good as your last piece of work. It's fair. It's not just not for writers. It's for artists. It's for people like what I do. It's for sports people.
So Joe, I put a link in the chat there. If you can share it, because Final Blackout is available now for only $2.99. That you can share that, they can go to the link there on that on Amazon, which is a pretty good deal. And it's,
I was going to say that link is longer than my autobiography, so it's a good thing that we can do it with a single click.
Exactly.
Pop it this way and let it send out to 100 million people at one time. There we go. Go away. There we go. Look at that. Go. Click. Keep going. Oh, it's taking so long. I had to take a pause.
And the thing about this book and Ender's Game too, but it also acknowledges, you know, the significance of Memorial Day is it does, you know, it doesn't just, you know, these are the people that made the ultimate sacrifice. It's also those people that actually believe in what America stands for, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's more important to really recognize that there is something worth fighting for. There is something that's important that people have to recognize. And it's unfortunate, and that there's a bit of an internal struggle with, whether you call it woke or whether you call it generational, but it's a lack of understanding, like what was actually fought for to be able to provide for these people, to be able to even have a country where they can say what they're saying, even though what they're saying is reprehensible. The fact that they can say it here and not be arrested or shot or exported to some Siberia, they don't realize that it's not like that everywhere, that they can do what they do here. And that's part of what this book is. I think Ender's Game, the whole thing of celebrating the importance of what the military does and what you've experienced, Joe.
How far is Ender's Game in the future?
It's really only about 100 years.
Yeah, see, I was thinking it was near now sci-fi.
Yeah.
When we were talking, I was like, yeah, when I watched it, and when, you're right, though. When you read it and you watch it, what is this to start off with? I can't fucking excuse my language. Why cannot Hollywood make a movie based on an actual book? Why is it every movie I see and I go read the book is almost always better than almost? There's been a couple.
I'll give it to you as quickly as I can, because here's what happens. The people with the money don't know how to read. They just don't. They didn't
send them an audio book.
They didn't get to their position of power by being literate.
Oh.
Even Hollywood directors, the top directors, they don't read the scripts at first. They have some poor flunky fresh out of or still in college read it and do coverage, which is a synopsis of it that analyzes it for its usefulness as a movie. So the children are monitoring what books get seen. Now, if the director actually reads the book and loves it, still, it's not the director's money. It's not the writer's money. The money belongs to the network executives who can't read. With a few exceptions, I've known a couple of executives in the networks and the studios who are sharp, smart, committed to quality, but they have to run the same gamut as anybody else, which is this going to lose us money? And what is it that makes it so that it'll make money? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Hollywood knows that its script is vital. They have no idea what a good script looks like until it's filmed and it turns out to have been good. Yes. They just don't know. So anytime you have something like Ender's Game, where it's really important that all of the cast of children be pre-puberty, because no one would believe a 14-year-old would actually believe everything adults told him. By that age, they're cynical about what adults say, and Ender's not a believable character if he is not still young enough to live in the universe created for him by adults. So that's a vital thing. But here's what happens in the executive suites. They say, the kid's supposed to be 10 years old. Children can't act. This kid has to be able to act. We need a child who's famous. And so they settled on Asa Butterfield, who was, because of Hugo and a couple of other things, well known. The trouble is, by the time he's well enough known that a Hollywood executive knows who he is, he's too old to play a child. There are, the number of child actors who can act is so tiny. Elijah Wood could act as a kid.
Shirley Temple.
Shirley Temple could mug. She was not an actress. Judy Garland was an actress. They were right to use her and not Shirley Temple in The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz did not need to be a cute movie. It needed to be a dangerous, tragic movie.
It's kind of a little dark.
It is very dark. It's like It's a Wonderful Life. Flopped because it was so dark. But it got made because Frank Capra wanted to make it. But it failed until it went into public domain. Nobody at the studio bothered to renew the copyright. So it went into public domain, and suddenly every TV station in America could run that movie at Christmas time without paying for it. Yeah. And it became one of the most beloved movies in American movie history. But prior to that, a guy who wants to commit suicide on Christmas Eve, I can just hear the studio executive going, we are going to lose all our money. No one wants that.
He knows damn right what he was saying too.
But that's the reason movies become bad. Now, there's another reason, which is not just fear, the fear of losing money. My son is a video game designer, and he was doing a video game. His company was the producer, but they had to report to the publisher, and the publisher sent an executive to executive who was younger than my son, who is not an old man, send an executive, and he said, "Okay, look, I've looked at your game; it's pretty good, but here's what you need. They need to be riding horses." Now, anybody who knows anything about computer games knows if you're going to add an entirely new animation element, you're going to have to come up with dozens of different horses that move differently. And now you have to have horseback moves for all of the characters. You're talking about another year of programming. And this was 3 months before the supposed release date. And so it's just one of those things where you just go, this guy has been sent to be in charge of us, and he knows diddly squat. He knows nothing about the job we do. And that's the other thing that happens, is that you have stupid people. So besides fearful people, stupid people are the death of so many movies. It's only now and then that you get a movie that is as good as or better than the book. The best case I can think of, Sense and Sensibility. Emma Thompson starred in it, and she wrote the script based on Jane Austen's novel. And it is better than the script. It was one of Jane Austen's earliest works. She was not yet sure of herself. She made some mistakes, especially toward the end. But Emma Thompson fixed them all. And it has one of the most powerfully emotional climaxes in movie history. And yet, that scene isn't even in the book. It's the best scene in the movie, not in the book. Why? Because everybody was committed to doing this thing right, not to improve on the book per se, but to bring the book to fruition better than Jane Austen knew how to do herself. So you can make good movies from good books. Sense and Sensibility is a good book, a hilarious, nasty, sarcastic, cynical, wry book that kept all of that and also still was a marvelous tearjerker. You can make a great movie out of a good book. It's just like 1 in 1,000 that can achieve that.
Well, today, so many movies.
I found a quote in here too, as I was looking for earlier on, which I really like. And it's part of why, this is it's a beloved story also amongst military, is this one paragraph where he says, where this is the lieutenant, and he said he's an unnamed, he never has a name, like you said, Scott. Maybe if it was a name, you have a lot of people named that person. But he says, I'm neither a politician nor a statesman. I'm a soldier. I know nothing of the chicanery which goes by the name of diplomacy. But I learned long ago that there's only one way to rule, and that is for the good of all. That the function of a commanding officer of a company or a state is to protect the rights of the individual within the bounds of common good, but never to trifle with the actual welfare of any man or to attempt to carry any man beyond his own ability and strength, for to do so weakens the position of all and is not for the common good. A state, gentlemen, is not a charity institution. On this score alone, I cannot accept your gifts. Now, if you please, the interview is ended. I shall be pleased to receive a report from my Sheerness battery commander tomorrow morning that the horizon is empty. This is when the United States diplomats came in, wanted to offer all this great stuff, and fight them off. But anyway, it's an amazing quote.
See, if I had read that when I was working on the script for Ender's Game, because I went through 20 drafts of my own. They never used my script. The final script I had, which did work, was never read by anyone at the studio, which is fine. It was read by my producers, so we all knew that a script for Ender's Game was possible. And I don't own the rights. I can't even publish it. But the struggle was that time after time I would write a script, and anybody who had already read Ender's Game and loved it would read that script and go, this is it. You've got it. You've nailed it. This is Ender's Game. But then people who had never read the book would look at the script and go, what's all the fuss about? Because it wasn't there. Ender wasn't there. And it wasn't until that final draft I did that I realized this is not a book about Ender and the teachers. This is not a book about Ender against the Hive Queen. This is not a book about Ender and Graf or Ender and Bean. It's not a buddy story. This is a book about a commander who loves his men more than he loves himself.
Right.
And that is what L. Ron Hubbard just said in that passage, that he regards the happiness of his people as being his highest priority, their survival, their improvement, their abilities, everything he can do to make them better. And if he does that, they will follow him anywhere. Because I finally realized that if Ender's Game was going to be made into a good movie, at the end, the audience had to wish they were in Ender's army and he was their commander, which is certainly not what the movie that exists ever even came close to doing. They just made him your standard rebellious twit. You know, the way that he behaves in the movie, nobody would give him command of a kitchen police squad because he's not reliable. You can't trust him to do his duty. But with Ender, in the book, you can trust him to do his duty, but his men trust him, his soldiers trust him to be looking out for them. They see that he is not looking out for his own safety. He's not looking out for his own career. He is looking out for them to prepare them to be the best commanders they can possibly be in the war to come. And when they see that he is acting for them and for their good, then they love him and they'll serve him because they trust him. And that is the thing that Final Blackout does so beautifully. By the end, you love the lieutenant. You trust him to always act for the good of others, and he lives up to that. He lives up to it. And that's a kind of a bold thing for a writer to do. But years ago, I discovered I don't care about conflict in fiction. I just don't care. It's not important. What matters is struggle. There's a struggle. And it doesn't need to be called conflict because it doesn't have to be conflict. But here's the thing. What moves me, what makes me care, is a story about good people doing good. I don't want Darth Vader to dominate the universe. I want good people to be the ones that I'm following. And so many movies don't know about that. So many science fiction writers don't understand that if you can't give us good people doing good, you're wasting your time, because those are the books, those are the stories that we love with a capital L, that become so emotionally compelling that we can't get out of the book, that when it's over, it's like when at the end of Lord of the Rings, when by the time I realized that Sam had been and always was the hero of Lord of the Rings. He's the only person who gave up the ring with complete willingness. He's the person that carried everybody else along because, and this is now we're back to the New Testament, whoever would be greatest among you has to be the servant of all. Because that's the same lesson that L. Ron Hubbard was talking about, is you serve the people under you in the form of leadership, but yes, they will follow where you lead if they trust you, if they know that you love them and care about them more than you care about yourself. There it is. Sermon over.
Yeah, and just like this is one of the lines that's another favorite line in here is, when that command remains, no matter what happens to its officer, he has not failed. And so this is still that whole thing there with the lieutenant.
And we saw that in the first couple of chapters, which is he is relieved of command. He is kept away from his soldiers. And they still, this is not a spoiler because it's the first few chapters for Pete's sake. But they still follow him and only him. And they do what they believe he would have them do, which in fact was what he would have them do.
Yeah.
And so the guys on top think that they have absolutely cornered him. He's checkmated. And then they find out, no, because the men will not do, the pawns will not do as they're told.
Yeah.
They do what he wants them to do.
Yeah.
And oh man, that is such a magnificent opening, where we realize that even when he's no longer their official commander, he's still their commander. He's still their leader, no matter what. They can't take that away from him.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing scene there.
Well, that's how it works when you got a good commander.
Yeah.
Oh, that was just somebody who was agreeing with what Jay was talking about with what Scott was saying earlier about Ender. He was just calling him a rebellious teenager.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in the movie, that's all that they gave Asa to do, was the rebellious teenager guy. Now, if Harrison Ford had been directing the movie, of course, he would never have settled for the script. But I was actually there on set. I was in the same room with him once because I was going to say a line that they wanted to record at the time. My part was completely cut, which is fine, but I still have my SAG card, so screw them. Anyway, I was in the room and sitting there with Harrison Ford on camera with Asa Butterfield. And the director came in and said a whole bunch of idiotic claptrap about, their feelings and the art and just all complete BS. And then he left. I saw Harrison Ford roll his eyes just a little. He wasn't being insubordinate. But then with each take, he would murmur something to Asa. And I was close enough to hear him say, okay, this time I'm going to touch your arm on this line instead of that line. That's what directors need to do, is to get the timing of events right. And what Harrison Ford did, and I commented on this to him, and he said, I just want to give the director something to work with. I want to give the editor something to work with. So no two takes were alike, because Harrison Ford was directing Asa Butterfield, not by telling him what to do, but by telling him what he was going to do, so that it didn't come as a surprise. It wasn't sprung on Asa, but it was a variation. And each variation, it was so subtle that I'm sure that most people looking at it on the screen would not realize what had just happened. But every single take could have been from a different movie, because each of those tiny changes in timing and in tiny physical actions, neither one of them got out of his chair. Every single one of them was telling and gave a different truth to the scene. I think that like Clint Eastwood is such a brilliant director, partly because he was a brilliant actor, and he expected his actors, as a director, he's famous for one or two takes, period. We got it. It's good. That's it. Why are we going to do more takes? We'll go on. And to my mind, that makes him, for one thing, a cheap date. I mean, he's always under budget. He never goes overboard and wastes money. But also, he trusts his actors, and he gives them the directions that they need to be able to deliver the movie, the story, properly, which is something that very few movie directors know how to do. Frank Capra knew. He knew how to do it. And you see things like the Adam Sandler Mr. Deeds. There are wonderful, brilliant moments in it when, I forget the actor's name, when he keeps coming in and saying, sneaky, 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 sneaky in Mr. Deeds. It's brilliant. And there's nothing like that in the original Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. But you know what? Adam Sandler ain't Gary Cooper, and the director is not Frank Capra, because the Mr. Deeds Goes to Town is flat out a much better movie. Not because Mr. Deeds was bad. Adam Sandler knows how to make good movies and makes them most of the time. Sometimes he makes silly, stupid movies that offend my sensibility because he took 2 hours out of my life. But that doesn't happen often. He's much more dependable than Woody Allen, for example, in delivering comedy. Well, Woody Allen used to be
don't get me
wonderful.
Started.
But then somebody told him he was an artist, and that just wrecked everything.
Yes, it did.
Same thing that happened to Stephen King. He got tired of being reviewed by the way they review writers that they hate. Because in the New York Times, the review you get when they hate you is, what in the world would possess a person to write a story like this? That's not a review. That's psychoanalysis by somebody who's unqualified and doesn't have enough data to work with. But if they respect you, then everything you did was right, and they point out how brilliant you are. And he wanted to write the kind of thing that got reviewed that way. And his first move there was with Misery. But then he soon got into an area where I just couldn't care about his characters. He was too busy being a writer with a capital W or a capital R. I don't care how you spell it. But he got seduced into trying to, quote, write well. If you're trying to write well, he wanted to create a better press, and it worked. He gets much more respectful reviews now, but he also is nowhere near as good a writer, a storyteller, I should say, as he used to be. He used to tell stories that made it so you could not let go of the book. Now
I tell every one of my hosts, everybody I lecture with, I said, once you start believing your own press, you are screwed. You just might as well retire right there and be done with it, because somehow or another it is going to bite you in the ass. Excuse my language.
You start caring about different stuff. You start caring about the wrong stuff. Anybody who is writing, thinking about the manner of writing, is dead already. That's dead. That writing is going to be bad, bad, bad. There's not a moment in L. Ron Hubbard's book, Final Blackout, where I'm thinking, oh, he really is proud of how he writes. No, the writer is never the star of that book. The lieutenant is the star of the book. He is the story. Hubbard never thought that he was the story. And what has happened is Stephen King now writes books starring Stephen King. Yeah, he used to write books starring the characters.
You know who else started doing that? He's not the greatest writer, but Whitley Strieber started doing that.
Well, but he also started telling science fiction stories as if they were true, and I think that was even if he actually believed it, that's not science fiction.
For the first movie, I can let him slide. For everything after that, he started writing books about how his son was the second coming, and it just got. But that goes back to believing.
Doesn't he know my son is? Oh well. Anyway,
all of our sons are like that. That's the problem. Oh, it's I'm when you said Rival the first time, the first movie came to my head was not the one you were talking about. It was the one with when they went to South America. What was his name? Was the star? Oh God, I can't even. He's pretty famous. There was two of them, and one of them had a really famous actor in it. I don't know why I can't think of his name right now, but that was the original Rival I was thinking about. Yeah, they went down to Arecibo, and he met some chick down there with these aliens with their legs that went backwards, and then he went to the big dish array in the United States. Oh, what is his name?
Well, I'm now going to have to admit something. I rarely watch science fiction movies because they were always so bad.
Well,
my money about that. Go in and walk out because they were just embarrassingly bad. But I don't know about. So that was during a time when I wouldn't even have gone to a science fiction movie. I made an exception with Star Wars, and Star Wars, in terms of common sense, is a very, very bad movie, but a wonderful adventure, absolutely wonderful. And Harrison Ford made that movie. He did a simple thing at the beginning when they were first just rehearsing, doing meetings together. He said, "Don't play this tongue in cheek. Play it absolutely straight. Play it sincerely. Don't play it like you're slumming." And they all listened to him, and they played it straight, and that's why Star Wars worked. If they had thought they were making Robin Hood Men in Tights, where it's all tongue-in-cheek, it would have made the money of Robin Hood Men in Tights, which was a respectable amount, but it doesn't endure in anybody's memory as a great, great story. Whereas with The Princess Bride, that one, they all played it absolutely straight. Slight exception, Billy Crystal. But everybody else was sincere. Cary Elwes was not tongue in cheek, and that's why
because
Princess
it was
Bride.
true love.
You what?
Because it was true love.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
it
and I have to say, it's because it had one of the great screenwriters of all time, who wrote one of the great novels of all time. When I was teaching, when I was a graduate teacher at Notre Dame University, this was before the movie came out, but I gave my freshman comp and lit students 2 books. The first one was I Am the Cheese by Robert Cormier, a children's book, which made the English majors, there were only 2 of them in the class, livid that I would have them read a children's book instead of an art book. But it's one of the best books ever written. And I could teach literature from that book better than any arty book. And the second book I gave them was The Princess Bride. And they, most of them, when they started reading Robert Cormier's book, they finished it that night. They couldn't go to sleep till they had finished it. With Princess Bride, it was 3 times as long, 4 times as long. And guess what? They still stayed up all night and finished it because they could not stop reading. No one had ever assigned them a book for English class that they couldn't bear to not finish in one go. Now, that tells you something.
Mm-hmm.
It tells you something about what they're normally required to read, which is pretentious drivel. And it tells you something about the books I gave them, which is great labors of love. It's from writers who loved their readers, not their writing. They were not in love with themselves. They had a gift to give, and they shaped it so that it would be as effective as possible for the readers to reach their hearts. And
every now and then you get books like that too.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was The Princess Bride, and that was the movie. The movie's not as good as the book, only because
it was a lot of fun.
There's things that can't be done in a movie. Just can't.
Well, no.
Yeah.
It still was a lot of fun. Oh, the first rival I was talking about was the one with Charlie Sheen is the one I was talking about.
Oh.
That was the first Arrival. They had Charlie Sheen in it, and then they made.
Now I understand why I never saw it.
I knew you was going to say that.
I mean, I learned early on, except for in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where Charlie Sheen has this really almost a cameo of a semi-hoodlum teenager, high school student. He's brilliant in that, absolutely brilliant. But after that, he thought he was funny, and that became a real damper on him in his career. I had to stop watching 2.5 Men when it did what that writer's work always does: one good season, and then it becomes silly sex comedy.
Who was
Big Bang
actor?
Theater?
Yeah.
Who's the actor? What?
Oh, I was thinking Starman. Who was the actor? It was one of the brothers.
Oh! I take it back. That was a great science fiction movie too. Jeff Bridges.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was for him acting too. It was. I don't know.
The
I was
fact that
surprised
he
by
did
the
not.
movie.
The only thing the fact that he did not get an Academy Award nomination or the award that year is a travesty. It's because nobody paid serious attention to science fiction.
Right.
Because that
It
was
a good
a
movie.
brilliant, perfect performance. The best thing he's ever done, but one of the best things any movie actor has ever done. So you're right to remember that. That one was just Starman was so fine.
Yes,
And of course, Firefly and Serenity.
Oh, I missed
That
it.
was
You know,
absolutely
what is it?
wonderful stuff.
I never understand what happened to Serenity. I mean, to Firefly. I mean, Serenity was a great movie, but the series was
You know what
fun.
happened?
It was
Remember what I
campy,
said
so
about
crazy.
remember what I said about network executives?
Yeah,
When they give a brilliant, beautiful piece of work like that time, it builds a following.
yeah.
And
would have, too.
if somebody had killed Seinfeld when it had ratings like that, we would never remember Seinfeld because it would only have had 10 episodes.
Yep.
But instead, they let it grow, let it build a following. But with Firefly, they pulled the plug way too soon.
Oh yeah, they did, and you can tell by the audience it has today. I mean, it's always on. It's on all the streaming services because it has.
It is, and my son gave me the DVDs for Christmas,
Yes,
and he said, "No, that's the whole series. That's all there is." And I thought, this was before streaming anything. And I thought,
Yeah.
there are only I can't remember the number, 8, 10
12.
episodes?
It was either 12 or 14, but it's
12
just
or 14. Okay, so not even a full season.
It's not
And-
full season.
And I for a year, I didn't even take it out of the plastic because it was science fiction. And the next Christmas, my son came and he said, Dad, you haven't even opened this. So I'm not kidding. It's the best science fiction that has ever been on television.
It's good science fiction. It's fun.
It is. When I watched it, I was blown away. I still, what's the name of the lead actor? He's on The Rookie and.
Oh yeah, and Scarecrow and Mr. King. What else was he? He was
Scarecrow. That was Pierce.
Oh,
Brosnan.
not Scarecrow. Not Scarecrow. Yeah, it was Bruce Boxer. No, it was he was playing something. He was a cop, not a cop, but
he was. It was. Anyway, what matters is that he is a wonderful actor.
Yes,
but
fun.
He needs wonderful material.
Well, that's
which is true of almost all actors. Very few actors. Anthony Hopkins can take weak material and be magnificent in it, but he can't make the parts that he's not in magnificent. He can only do that when he's on the screen. There aren't many actors who can do that, but Hopkins is one of the rare ones. Peter O'Toole was another. The fact that that man died without an Oscar is a permanent blot on the Oscars. It's a mark of shame to them.
They got multiple blots of shame.
Well, they do. But the year that Peter O'Toole gave us The Lion in Winter,
that was
magnificent performance. And John Wayne got the Oscar for, was it The Shootist or was it True Grit? Anyway, the one that has Fill Your Hands, You Sons of Bitches. John Wayne, there's nothing wrong with him. He was a good performer. And he did better acting earlier on before he became this icon, this walking statue.
Yeah,
But he, to have given the Oscar to anyone but Peter O'Toole in the year of Lion in Winter, they had the sense to at least have a tie between Streisand in Funny Girl and Katharine Hepburn in Lion in Winter. But no, Peter O'Toole was shut out. But that's okay. I finally stopped watching the Oscars. I watched it every year. Bob Hope, I loved. Still, there's never been a better MC, though I've got to say that what's his name from Princess Bride?
He was a
Billy Crystal. Billy Crystal did a great job. And there have been some pretty good ones, but Bob Hope I loved. But we had Oscar parties, for heaven's sake. But the last year that we held that party, nobody had seen any nominated movies because nobody wanted to see the movie that they were promoting. They promote the movie they want you to come see. And if the promotions make you want to stand in line for an hour and a half to stay away, to not have to see it.
They'd have to pay me to watch the Oscars now.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that I just don't care. Yeah. Especially since after the ridiculous Oscars So White campaign, which was stupid, Black people had already received, proportionate to their population in Hollywood, more Oscars than white people did, proportionately. So there was no Oscars So White problem. But then they made that rule that to be nominated, you had to have a certain percentage. I'm sorry, they're no longer about Best Picture. They're about most obedient filmmakers. Yeah. And obedient filmmakers don't make great movies. Yeah. They just don't. They can't.
I don't know. Yeah. Oh, jeez. Look, Jay, somebody's plugging you, John. Somebody's plugging you down here, man. It's I'll put it up there so you can see it. That's John. That's Jay. It's
the Writers of the Future Awards.
I mean, Oscars, I would watch if there was something movie, but gotta be honest with you, there's not much in the way of movies I see coming out anymore. I forced myself to watch Altered Carbon, which I ended up enjoying somewhere throughout the series. But Altered Carbon,
which Carter?
It's called Altered Carbon. It's a Netflix series.
Not an Oscar. That was an Oscar.
No, I did not. And the problem with this series is it's fun to watch. There's a lot of good stuff in it, but there's a lot of gratuitous sex and a lot of violence. So
well, for a lot of people, you just advertised
I
it.
won't watch that.
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
But for a lot of people, they won't. So it's unfortunate because it's a really good sci-fi. It's about how they store your essence of who you are on a disc in the back of your neck, and when you die, they can just take it out and put it in another body.
So basically, a human black box.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And it's basically was, and it's based on alien technology they found on another world that took them forever to get to. But it's an interesting series, but it deals with what happens when oligarchs start living 3 and 4 and 5 and 600 years unchallenged. Really,
my first science fiction stories after Ender's Game were all about that exact situation.
Yes, and that might have been where you got the idea from.
It's an idea that's been floating around in science fiction forever, which is, what if you don't die? What if you can live forever? And basically, all the writers keep coming down on the side of death, that dying is actually good for your life. That if you didn't die, no one would ever be able to decide who you actually were. Because there's no way to put a period on it. There's no way to say, and this is where it ends. And
plus, you're not going to be the same person. I'm not the same person I was when I was in my 20s. Not even close.
Ooh, you're a better man than I am.
Because I see, I'm not going to be the same person. Maybe
all the dumb stuff I did then.
I did a lot of dumb stuff.
Dumb.
No, I'm not that dumb. No, I'm not that dumb.
I just don't have the physical prowess to carry out my dumb plans the way I did then. But some good things, looking into my past, I knew on our first date that I was going to marry my wife. I knew it.
That's good.
It was in late October. I bought a diamond for her. I didn't want to buy a ring. That's stupid. She should pick out her own ring. She's the one who's going to have to wear it. But I bought a diamond for her. I didn't give it to her for 3 more years. We had an up and down courtship, but I never thought of giving that diamond to anybody else. It was hers. I knew. Now that was not stupid. It was the best decision I made in my entire life ever. And I made some good ones, but head and shoulders, that was it. And
that's an awesome decision. She's an amazing woman.
Well, she really is. But at the age of 22, I had one smart thing in me. Now I remember so many dumb things I've done, but a few smart things. If I had to do it all over again, would I? Yeah, I'd probably do every single thing the same.
You can't learn if you don't. You're not the same person if you change it.
Well, but in this case, well, it's one of those. I have written books that are better than Ender's Game, in my opinion. Stories that meant more to me, that affected me more emotionally. But the audience loves Ender's Game. I'm not going to argue with them and say, no, you're wrong. This is a better book. I just write the book that I believe in and care about at the time. That's all anybody can do, unless they do the bad thing, which is to write a book to try to impress people. If you're trying to impress people with your writing,
you had to do an introduction because the book you were originally trying to sell was an Ender's Game.
That's true.
So you had to have that to lay the groundwork for. Was it the xenophobia? Which one was it?
Well, when the novel, I was going to be Speaker for the Dead.
Speak for the Dead.
But
right.
Speaker for the short story of Ender's Game already existed, so that novel was a sequel to the short story. But then I realized nobody's read the short story. Plus, it doesn't end right. I need to set up Ender as a Speaker for the Dead, and so I wrote the novel so that I could write a last chapter called The Speaker for the Dead, and then write the novel afterward. And so my publisher loved the man. I went to the ABA in American Booksellers in Dallas that year, and I said, Tom, I can't write Speaker until I've written a novel version of Ender's Game. And he stuck out his hand and said, same terms as Ender's Game? I shook his hand and said, yes. There it was. Agents still got their 10%, but it was because that was long enough ago that Agents got 10%. But it was best move of my life in terms of writing was to do a novel version of Ender's Game. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I was winging the novel. I had the story in mind, but I don't even get to the beginning of the short story until more than halfway through the book. And all the other stuff, it was just my older brother and my older sister transplanted into the future and exaggerating my older brother's meanness a little, not much. We still don't get along.
Big brothers are for, man. Let's be honest.
But I found out when I was 6 years old that he not only did not love me, he didn't care about me. And that's not a good thing to find out about your big brother. Big brother's supposed to protect you. And when he had the job to protect me, and my parents had asked him to, from a bully that was on this path, he took me to the beginning of the path, and instead of walking with me through it, he decided it was too embarrassing to walk through with a first grader. And he went off and joined his friends a different route. And the bully that I was hiding from was there, but it was a second grader who stepped in and stopped the bully. Not my brother, but a total stranger. And I knew something from then. I knew that I could not count on this guy. And I never have been able to. He's been what Peter was to Ender, an enemy. But your enemy teaches you how to defeat them. Yeah, and, that's the way it goes. But see, that's all I was doing was just taking my autobiography and translating it into military school and then taking the Army of the Potomac and showing an array of bad commanders the way that Bruce Catton did in that book, that trilogy.
It's also the bad commanders that Hubbard showed in Final Blackout too.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, we got to go. I didn't know we was 15 minutes over the hour here. I'm surprised the other show hasn't called me and cussed me. Jay, you're not doing your job down there, man. You letting me run over.
If you can't go overtime in a podcast, what's a podcast for?
Well, it's not actually a podcast. We're live radio 24/7.
Oh, we are?
Yeah, we're live.
I did not realize that.
Yes,
okay.
But not just on radio. You're on television as well.
Well, see, I'm stunned that I've done talk radio, and there were no dead stops. There were no places where you had to cut
see
for ads.
now when you're with me in places and like when I'm in location, I go as long as I want. Here it's different. And no, I didn't do the promos at the break because I'd rather listen to you than them. I was just to be honest with you.
So there were breaks that I didn't know about.
No, we didn't take them. I skipped them.
Straight through. We did the opening.
I skipped them. Yeah, I did. I did a couple at the beginning. I would rather listen to the breaks. The breaks can wait. We got a 4-hour show coming on after this.
I have
get
to
lots
say,
of breaks.
Now looking at you, I see real power. The ability to preempt a commercial break because you like the content that's going on. That's power. When I was in talk radio, you made the hard breaks. Period.
And I should, but I didn't.
Because they'd cut you off. If you didn't wind up for the hard break, then take the hard break anyway. When it needed to be there.
They cut me off. Guess what? They just got fired. I own the place. There ain't no cutting me off.
Unfortunately, we were just talking to you about what 3.3 million.
Oh, I think we might have. Last week I think we might have.
Oh no, I'm sure that because I went on too long on some of my rants.
No, I think
we've been able to cut that number way down.
No, I'm not 100% sure because I hadn't added them up. From what I can see, I think we went over 4. But I'll know in a few minutes when I stop the service. I'll know for sure. But I can see just on the European servers somewhere around looks like about 1.3 million.
And of course, this is in English.
People on this one just now, Scott.
So we don't have any Japanese or German subtitles running. They just have to understand.
No, they have to listen to us in English. And we got picked up in Hong Kong about 20 years ago. And then no longer than that, just before the switch, before Xi Jinping took over, we were in Hong Kong and under Pioneer Radio, which I still own. And when England gave back Hong Kong, the People's Republic Radio contacted me and said, look, you can stay in our country. We'll give you an additional 12 servers in Beijing and other cities, and we'll even pay for them. But you cannot talk about the leader, but you can talk about China, just not the leader. I said, fine, I could deal with that. So when Xi Jinping took over, I got a phone call, and the guy says, well, look, we have a new leader now. We want you to stay, but same rules. You can't talk about she, but you can talk about everything else. I said, now we got a little bit of a problem. He said, why? I said, because I won't talk about she on your stations, on what goes through China. I said, but in the United States, in some cases, I will have to talk about him, especially when we're in a political year, because it makes a difference in how our politicians work out. And he was like, really? So then they went ahead and said, okay, they could live with that. And they sent me a written contract, which I signed. And they still, to this day, they pay for all the hard servers over there, which there's 16 of them now, through all of China. So they take care of all of that expense. And so anywhere from 200,000 to 5 million Chinese can be listened to us at any one time. And the same thing with India. India's got about 8 or 12 servers in it now. But right now, worldwide, we house about 214 servers.
And I got to say that the fact that English is so widely known, I was surprised at the extent of it. When I went to Brazil,
nice.
I speak Portuguese. And so I have, I conducted everything I did in Portuguese. So that was fine. They were amazed that an American actually even knew that they speak Portuguese in Brazil. But then I went to, where was it? I think it was Germany. And they had a translator for me. And I would be speaking, and I know how to talk so the translators have time. There, I would say something funny, and half the audience would laugh immediately. Then the interpreter would repeat it in German, and the other half would laugh, but not as enthusiastically because they knew something funny was coming, which just kills a laugh.
Yeah.
But sorry, I don't do stand-up, but I come close enough that I know that. But it astonished me that in a country where, you can grow to adulthood and never meet an English speaker. I mean, you don't have to speak English. That so many people had learned it so well that they could understand humor and get jokes and irony and so forth in English without an interpreter. I was blown away.
Half of the Japanese and Chinese people I know speak better English than I do. So
yeah, and see, that isn't that amazing that and then you come to America, and how many people speak another language?
In our country,
even the Hispanics, even American Hispanics, generally tend to speak Spanglish rather than Spanish anymore. Once they've lived here for a while.
Well, I speak English and coon-ass is what I speak. So
I hear a little coon-ass in your voice.
Yes,
it's good to know that. It's good to know that you.
But no, my wife she's multilingual. Then we got a few other family members that speak more than one language, but 90% of all my friends speak English, and some of them speak proper English, but most of them speak slang English, and that's just where they are. Unless we're somewhere
Let me correct your
definition. 3 languages, you call them multilingual. What do you call somebody that speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call somebody that speaks 1 language? American.
Yeah, pretty much. But in Europe, you kind of have to speak more than one language if you live in Europe. I mean, Europe is a melting pot of language.
If you cross the street, you're in Luxembourg.
Yeah,
you have to know what they're speaking there, though I've never actually heard a definitive statement of what Luxembourg speaks. What I've heard is French people say they speak bad French. Germans say they speak bad German. So whatever Luxembourgese is, it gets no respect. But see, I happen to live in a subculture in America because I'm LDS. And so many of us go on foreign language missions, serve 2 years in another country. In 2 years, you pretty well learn the language, or at least the part of the language that you're using. And so I live in a culture where every Mormon church group that I attend, there are people there, other people who speak Portuguese, other people who speak Spanish, any of the languages of their missions, those languages are spoken. It would be hard for a non-English speaking person to come to a Mormon congregation and not find someone who speaks their language fluently.
Well, that's a good
thing. That makes us unusual for Americans. It
is, unless you're Catholic, and then they usually speak 4 or 5 languages.
Well, but 3 of
them. Wait, let me retract it. I know. I was going to say, let me retract that because it's not exactly a true statement. No, Jimmy, we got to go. Scott, we're gonna have to have you back on. We barely touched into any of this, and we're almost 30 minutes over.
But this is one of the best conversations on this topic that I've ever had. So thanks.
This is a great conversation. And see, anytime I'm talking with people like you, I'm actually learning something. You know, I've learned so much about writing from John. And I mean, I was such a novice when I started hanging out with these guys. And now, you know, because I do a lot of lecturing. And when I'm on tour, a lot of times I'll be talking to different colleges. And so I'll be talking with an English professor. He says, wow, I didn't know you were an author. I said, what do you mean? He said, you use a lot of words. I said, I'm not an author. I said, not even close to one. That's not even pretend. I said, but I hang out with a bunch of them. So I've picked up a lot of the jargon. And I said, I have a better understanding of what they're talking about when they're talking to me. You know, because before I was like, what? I'd actually have to stop guest in the middle of the show, explain whatever that terminology was. See, now I don't have to. I actually knows what's being said, and I can always break it down for the layman later on. So it works really good.
On my mission in Brazil, I never talked about literature with anybody. But when I was at the science fiction convention that I attended there, it was all about literature. But then I discovered the great trick with Romance languages is any verb that ends in ate, abdicate, fornicate, obfuscate, you just change it to an AR verb, ofuscar, fornicar, you know, and Brazilians are laughing. It worked. I was able to fight my way through discussions of literature using Latinate English and doing a sort of on-the-fly translation into Portuguese. It's amazing how easy it is, but you have to know both languages for it to work.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Make
sure.
Plug it out real quick.
Absolutely.
The link is there on all your 100 million.
Y'all go check it out.
It's Final Blackup Hour and Hubbard.
It's a century-old book, nearly. Not quite, but
it's
getting there.
It's getting there.
But don't think of it as an old book because it still reads new. It is a new book and powerful.
Yeah, you can start. I'm sorry, I was letting them know you can start. But you go ahead, Jay. Start. We're wrapping up here. We're gonna bring Scott back on with us, ladies and gentlemen. Go out, get the book. Actually, go out and buy a bunch of books. People, I say this every year: buy the books, read the books, give them away as Christmas presents,
or buy the audiobook and listen to the book.
Yeah.
Well, you see, me, that's I actually tell guests when they're coming on my show if they have audiobooks. I said, if you want me to read your book, send me an audiobook. I said the odds of me sitting down and reading a book these days is about the same odds of God coming down and tell us he's going to make us all billionaires. I said, so
that hasn't happened to you yet?
No, not yet. So but it's easy for me because, I do a lot of computer work or I do a lot of driving and I can listen to audiobooks, because John could have never got me through Mission Earth if I'd had to read all 10 books. It would have never happened. But with the audiobooks, I could listen to them when I wanted to, go back and listen to them when I wanted to. Same way I got through Battlefield Earth was with the audiobooks. It's just easier for me. It doesn't matter how long they are because I got lots of time to read and listen to stuff. But reading,
when I taught at a university that was 3 hours away from where I live, I had that 3 hours each way commute.
Yes, that's excellent.
And so long books like Mr. Norrell and Jonathan Strange. I got the title backward probably, but that was too thick a book for me to be excited to read it. But I listened to it and loved it. But part of the good thing about audiobooks is you can't skip. So when I taught a class in Tolkien and Lewis, the fiction of Tolkien and Lewis, I made my students, before the semester began, listen to an audiobook version of Lord of the Rings. Now there's one that Andy Serkis reads, which is brilliant, but the previous version was brilliant. Because if you're reading it, you will skim. You will skip over all the songs. You will skip a lot of stuff. But I didn't want my students to miss any of this greatest work of literature in the English language ever.
Lord of the Rings got me through tech school.
Well, it would have gotten me through anything.
Take off a minute and I'll be back.
Go ahead. We're getting ready to wrap up.
I need to get the numbers.
I'm babbling. We need to
No, we're getting out of here. But no, we'll talk more about this in the future.
Said hello to you. So Gunhild and Emily and all the people here at the office said hello to you, Scott. They really.
Well, thank them for me because I miss them when I'm not there.
They're scary. You got to watch out for them girls. They are scary, man.
I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Especially that one named Maliva, man. She's double scary. It's
But it's scary in the sense,
Yeah, it was great.
competent scary.
Oh yeah,
that
they're extremely
They
competent.
say they're going to do,
You
they
know,
do, and
I
it
tell them
gets
every year.
done.
I tell them every year, Scott, when I show up, I said, I'm always so worried one of y'all going to jump out of a closet with a knife and stab me to death. And I'm like, what do you mean? I said, y'all are just so nice. It scares me.
But I've over the years, over 30 years now, I have found that they mean it.
They
That's
do mean
who
it.
they are.
I've been with them for 6 years now, and so far, and you can bet your ass, you can ask John. I was not a nice person when they originally called me. I was really rude to John, really mean to John. I said, I don't have nothing to do with you. I said, I don't believe right. He said, what? I said, you ain't doing no real contest. You're blind judge. I said, you're so full of shit. Nobody blind judges anything. And because I've been asked to come to a lot of these contests over the years, and most of them, when I got there, it turned out to be, well, not so honest. Let's leave it at that. The last one I went to,
like casting in community theater. Whoever's putting up the money gets the lead.
yeah, and well, you know, the one I went to New York, they were asking all the winners for money and stuff, and I told the guy the second day, I said, you know what, why don't you just go ahead and get my air ticket early? I said, because if I have to stay here another day, you're not going to like the review I write. I said, so if I was you, I would just let me go today and leave it at that, tomorrow and leave it at that. But with John and them, you know, he told me all this stuff, and I'm like, there's no way, it's all bullshit. And this went on for a full year. And because he was trying to get on the network, and I told him, I said, it's not going to happen. And then he finally just calls me up one day. He goes, look, I got a plane ticket for you. Got a hotel room for you. Why don't you just come down and find out for yourself? I said, all right. I said, but the deal is I want access to everyone. No restrictions, no nothing. I want to be able to talk to the winners. I want to be able to talk to the staff, and I want to be able to talk to the judges. And I said, I want them to tell me from their point of view what the hell is going on here. And sure enough, he gave me complete access to everyone.
They truly have nothing to hide.
They don't. And the best part was when I asked a question, I didn't get I got an answer immediately. I mean, there was no him hawing around, no bullshit. Yes, Joe, this is how they all call me Mr. Joe in the beginning. I said, stop doing that. I'm not that old. Stop calling me Mr. Joe. I said, you don't have to call me Mr. Nut. I was like, but I was, and then once I got there, and the first year I went to hang out with him was their double year COVID. So they had two groups of winners in. So instead of having the usual 24, they had 48. And I don't even know how they did it. And we were at the Roosevelt, but it was a great group of people. I watched them all work, you know. I watched them go through everything. No one tried to put anything on them. No one tried to ask them to do anything they weren't supposed to be. All the winners came and won and went home with their money and their stuff, and no phony monkey business in between. I was impressed. I was like,
and look, one of the things that really surprised me as a former proselytizing missionary for a church, I expected to be hit up and proselytized for Scientology. Never happens. It has never happened. In 30 years of associating with the contest, no one has ever tried to advance Scientology through the contest.
Not
the
one
contest
person.
That's what L. Ron Hubbard wanted it to do. It advances science fiction, not.
And I'm very honest when people ask me about that. I was given a lecture at Tulane University, a political lecture, and at the end, people now know I do some stuff with Rise of the Future. So a lot of the lectures ends, people always ask me about it. I'm always like, and I tell them the story and all. And they're like, what's science? I said, no, actually it's not. It has nothing to do with them. I said, Elron it's his money that pays for stuff. I said, that and Galaxy Press pays for everything. I said, they're a fabulous group of people. And I said, they can really change your career. I said, so submit. But anyway, we got to go. Even though we were talking about nice about John, he wasn't here. Shh, don't let him know, man. His head's already as freaking big. we can't make it bigger than what it is.
He is a pathologically modest man.
Yes,
you cannot make his head big.
Oh, I can. Trust me.
Thank you very much, Scott. And Joe, we'll talk more later.
This has been such a pleasure.
I had a great time. Ladies and gentlemen, y'all be sure to check up on Orson Scott Card anytime you can. He's out there all the time now. I know he's been out signing and going places and stuff like that. Y'all missed him last year. He was at Dragon Con. So y'all should get out there and talk to the guy, say hi, get your autographs done. People and you people that are naming your kids, I want to meet y'all. Okay, I'm coming to Dragon Con. I want to meet.
I gotta say, it's bad enough that some of you name your kid Ender, but that's fine. Just don't ever name your child Orson. I had that name growing up, and you don't.
Orson's a cool name. Look who came before you. The guy who scared the whole planet. I mean the whole country.
It's a horrible, horrible name for a first grader. I just want you to.
Oh, yeah, I could. That's probably damn true. But anyway, guys and girls, we got to get out of here. I want to thank Scott for being here, John, and talk to you soon. And actually, we did break 4, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But ladies, I got to go. I'm already late for other show. I'm supposed to be screaming and acting like a crazy, insane person on another show right now. Yes, they don't get the polite Joe on the chat. Just so y'all know. So no, Jeannie, anybody's invited. Anybody can come chat, guest, host. It doesn't matter. But I just warn people. My language might change a little bit. Anyway, on that note, I want to thank everyone for tuning into the Authors Quill and United Public Radio. Be sure to keep up, and stay in tune with the station. Good night, everybody, and stay tuned for the chat. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure Laura Lee and Jay are already there. Goodbye, everybody.
See you, Scott.
Bye-bye. See you.
Well, I play audio stream. What are you talking about?